All right, so this is DSMA 3 order of operations. You've probably heard it as PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I know there are other ones. I don't know other ones. Most of us learned this in elementary school, but a lot of us learned incorrectly. So let's take a look here. The P is for parentheses, but it's actually for all kinds of grouping symbols. So we have parentheses, we have square brackets, we have absolute value. We're going to do that later on. We actually even have a fraction bar. That is also a grouping symbol. I know there's more, but I can't think of them at the moment. Then the E is for exponents. We'll deal with those in a few minutes. Now, here's where a lot of us were taught wrong when we were younger. The multiplication and or division happens at the same time. Okay, some people were taught to do all multiplication and then go back and do all division. That is not correct. We're going to go from left to right, and we're going to take care of multiplication and or division, whichever one comes first, at working left to right. And then finally, addition and subtraction. So we're going to do some problems together. I'll just show you a little bit on the calculator. The calculator knows order of operations and PEMDAS, and it is strict about the PEMDAS. All right, let's get going. Okay, so this is actually two separate problems. So let's look at the one on the left first. We have -8 raised to the third power. Now notice the parentheses. That means that the negative is also raised to the third power. So an exponent tells me how many times I need to write the number. So let's say I had up here 5 squared. That would be 5 times 5. Notice the two 5s. This one's a 3. So it would be -8 times -8 times -8. So of course a negative times a negative gives us a positive, but then there's one more negative. And then 8 times 8 times 8 is 512. So let me show you on the calculator here. I know your calculator might look a little bit different, but the keyboard is about the same. You'll be able to find the keys. So we have our parentheses here above the numbers. You just hit those to get your parentheses. The negative key, I'm not sure it's here on the 9860, but it looks like a negative inside parentheses. That's negative versus subtraction, which is over here. So that's important. We'll talk about that later. This one's going to be a negative. And on the calculator, it looks smaller. A negative is going to look smaller than a subtraction. And then you're going to come over here to this key that looks like an X with a box. That's going to allow you to put an exponent in. It's not going to put an X in there, but after the parentheses, it'll let you put the exponent in there. The only thing is, if you have to type more after the exponent, you would have to use this right arrow key here to come back down and type more. But the calculator can help you out with these. All right, now on the other side, we have the negative out front. So the negative is not raised to the third power. This is actually the equivalent of this. That it's a -1 sitting out front that is not raised to the power. The 2 is raised to the power. So that would leave us with -1 times 2 times 2 times 2 would give me 8. And so that would be a -8. Now, you're not going to see a difference with an odd exponent, but with an even exponent, it does make a difference. So it's important that we watch for those parentheses. And remember, the parentheses, if the negative is inside the parentheses, then the negative is raised to the power as well. Now, I know you could put these in your calculator, but I'm going to walk you through just to give you some review of order of operations in PEMDAS. So with this one, we do have parentheses, but there's nothing to clean up inside the parentheses. So we're going to leave that be. Now, in algebra, if you have a number in front of the parentheses and it's not, there's no plus sign or minus, so it's not 3 plus and then the parentheses. If it's 3 just literally hanging out in front of the parentheses, that means that this is actually multiplication. Okay, so a number in front of the parentheses, that the number that's sitting right in front of the parentheses like that, that's really multiplication. So we don't have any exponents, so let's go ahead and take care of multiplication. Then we have 5 plus out front. We can't take care of that yet. We're going to only take care of multiplication and division And so that would give us what, a -6, which technically we should put in parentheses. And now we can take 5 plus -6, and that gives us -1. Okay, let's try the one over here. So again, we do have parentheses, but there's nothing to clean up inside. It's just denoting that we have a negative number. So we're going to leave that alone right now. There are no exponents. So now we're going to take care of either multiplication or division, going from left to right. Well, going from left to right, we have this -8 out front. We have plus, so we're not going to do that yet. 6 divided by 2 would give us 3. And then finally, we can do the addition. -8 plus 3 gives us -5. So those are two separate problems. Okay, let's try this one. So the dot means multiplication also. There's lots of ways we show multiplication. It could be a little x, could be a dot, could be an asterisk, could be parentheses. So we don't have any grouping symbols. We don't have any exponents. We do have multiplication here. So let's go ahead and take care of that. So that would give us 56 minus 14. Now at this point, we could just do addition and subtraction from left to right. I like to group my numbers. I put my positive numbers together and my negative numbers together. Just avoids errors, but it's up to you. So this would give me 59 minus 14, and that would leave me with 45. Okay. Okay, so lots of negatives going on. We have to watch what we're doing. And we have a negative with a negative like we practiced before in another section. So let's kind of look at this. We do have parentheses, but the parentheses just denote that we have a negative number inside. They also denote the multiplication with the number in front of them. So I'm going to rewrite this. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to rewrite this. So I have 9 times -5 plus -1 times -17, right? Because remember, if we have a negative in front of the parentheses like this, that means it's -1. We just don't usually put the 1 there, but the 1 is definitely there. It's implied. So that would be -1 times -17. So let's go ahead, no exponents, so let's take care of multiplication. We don't have any division, so we only have to worry about multiplication. We have -45 here, plus -1 times -17 gives us a +17. And I think that leaves us with -28. You guys double check me on that one. Okay, so we have parentheses, but there's nothing to clean up inside the parentheses. I'll get to one of those soon. There's just a -23 sitting there denoting a negative number. No exponents, so let's go ahead and take care of multiplication and division. So we're going to work from left to right. We have 6 times 7. That gives us 42. Then we have 5 times 8. So that's 40, and then plus -23. Okay, so we're left with just addition and subtraction. Remember that when you see -40, it's the same as plus a -40. I know that's kind of weird looking, but that's what happens. So me personally, I like to add all my positive numbers and my negative numbers together. So I'm going to add -40 and -23. That's going to give me -63. And so then when I add those two together, I get -21. Of course, you have your calculator to do all this, but we just want to make sure that you know the rules and you're working through some of these rules so that when we start adding variables in here and you can't use your calculator, you still know the rules. Okay, so here we're going to add a little more going on. We have exponents, and we also have to clean up inside the parentheses. So I'm going to go strict by the rules. I know with order of operations, there's some other things that you can do along the way, but let's stick with the rules here. So we need to clean up the inside of the parentheses first. So I have 4 squared out here. Inside here, I'm going to go ahead and take care of the exponent. So 3 times 3 times 3 gives me 27. And so I actually have 2 minus 27. So let's go ahead and finish up the inside here. I have negative 25 inside the parentheses. So my parentheses are all cleaned up. I know I have a negative 1 out front. I'm going to take care of that in a minute. There, I've got that implied negative 1 sitting out front. But let's go ahead and take care of our exponent. So 4 times 4 is 16. Minus 1 times a negative 25 gives me plus 25. And so if I add that all together, I get 41. Let's take a look at the calculator. Okay, so again, I know my calculator is a little different than yours, but it's close. So first you're going to type a 4 on the keyboard, and then you can hit your x squared key here. X squared. That's going to give you an exponent of 2 and leave you on the same line. Then you're going to hit minus. You're going to hit your opening parentheses, type 2 minus 3, and then at that point, hit this key over here next to the x squared, and it is an x with a box. That box will let you type whichever exponent you want. So you're going to type the 3 in the exponent box, but now you have to move back down. You cannot put the parentheses up there in the exponent. So you're going to go to your arrows and you're going to hit your right arrow key. I don't think the down works. I think you have to do the right, just like in my math lab. And then you can hit your closing parentheses. Then you hit your equal sign and you get the same answer. Woohoo! Okay, so remember I mentioned that a fraction bar is also a grouping symbol. So what I mean by that is that we have to clean up these separate. We have to clean up the numerator first on top, and then we have to clean up the denominator, and then we can put them back together and simplify. So let's take care of the numerator first on top. No grouping symbols, no exponents. So let's go to multiplication and division going from left to right. So we are going to take care of this division first. We have 28 divided by 4 is 7. And then plus 5 times 2 is 10. That gives me 17. That's going to go on top in the numerator. For the bottom, we need to clean up the inside first. So we have 13 minus 6. We can't take care of that exponent on the outside yet because we haven't cleaned up inside the parentheses. That's part of the PEMDAS. So 3 times 2 gives us 6. 13 minus 6 is 7. And then 7 squared is 49. Now this one we do not, we're not able to simplify any further because 17 is a prime number. And so our final answer is 17 over 49. Now you can put this into the calculator. There is a key that looks just like this. That is your fraction key. When you hit that, you will be able to type whatever you need on the top, and then you can arrow down and type what you need on the bottom, hit equal sign, and it will, that Casio's magic, it will even simplify for you. If you need a decimal, you're going to hit a key that looks like this. It's an FD key that switches back and forth between fraction and decimal. But the important things with the fraction is that you clean up the numerator on top, you clean up the denominator on the bottom, and then you can simplify. All right, so let's take a look. Again, we have a fraction, so we have to do the numerator, the top, separate from the denominator, the bottom. The top has a lot of negative signs, so let's take a look here. Remember that this is really like 4 times negative 5, and then plus, and this is negative 4 times negative 3. Those are not x's, that's multiplication. All right, so 4 times negative 5 would give me a negative 20. Then I have negative 4 times negative 3 gives me a positive 12. Negative times a negative gives a positive. and that leaves me with negative 8. So negative 8 goes on top. Then on the bottom, we just have 6 minus 4, which is 2. So I'm going to put 2 on the bottom. Negative 8 goes on top. And then we need to clean that up. So negative 8 divided by 2 would be negative 4. So again, be careful if you are trying to put this into your calculator, because the negative here in front of the 5 and the negative in front of the 3, those have to be negative in your calculator. Some calculators are very, very picky about that. Whereas the subtraction here, this is subtraction. So then you just use the key that looks like this. Okay, very picky. The calculator will show a negative will be shorter than the subtraction. Okay, let's take a look at another fraction. A little more going on here. So in the numerator on top, we have 13 times 2 minus 5 squared. So let's go by PEMDAS. We're going to go ahead and square the 5. 5 times 5 gives me 25. Then we're going to do multiplication and division. So we only have multiplication, 26. 13 times 2 is 26 minus 25. That gives me 1. So that's going to go in the numerator on top. For the denominator, we've got to clean up the inside first. Now, this is the first time we've seen brackets. We do use brackets a lot in algebra, but it's just another grouping symbol. If you're putting it in the calculator, there's no brackets in the calculator, but there are parentheses. So you can do a double parentheses is what you would do. So let's just take care of the inside first, because we cannot do this square because it's on the outside. We can't square until we clean up the inside. So we have 4, right? 2 times 2 is 4. And then we have negative 1 times negative 8. So that's going to be plus 8. That's going to all be squared. So 12 squared, that gives me 144. So I have 144 in the denominator. And that's all we can do. But it's very important that the 1 stays put in the numerator because this is a fraction. And so the final answer is 1 over 144. Okay, so we have a fraction again. We've got exponents. We're going to take care of the numerator versus the denominator. But this time we have what we call absolute value bars. So absolute value bars kind of look like an 11 up here, right? You have bars and you're going to have a number in between. This is tied to distance. Therefore, if let's say I was sitting at 2 here, positive 2, and I want to know the distance back to 0 on the number line, well, that would be 2 tick marks back to 0, right? So the absolute value of 2 would just be 2 because it takes 2 tick marks back to get to 0. Now, if I was sitting out here at negative 3 and I took the absolute value of negative 3, that would take 3 tick marks to get back to 0, right? And this is all about distance. Absolute value is about distance. And so the distance to get back to 0 would be positive 3. So what happens, let me mark this out because it has nothing to do with the problem. What happens is if you have a positive number inside the absolute value, it's going to stay positive. It's distance back to 0 on the number line. If you have a negative number inside the absolute value, it's going to become positive, but you drop the absolute value bars because that's the distance to get back to 0. So let's get back to our problem here. So we have a few grouping symbols. Let's take care of that. We have the parentheses here, and we have the absolute value here. So let's go ahead, and 6 minus 7 would give me negative 1. I'm going to square that in a minute. Then I have negative 3 times the absolute value. 6 minus 9 would give me negative 3. So it'd be the absolute value of negative 3. And so that is going to give me a positive 3. right? And so here I would have negative 3 times 3. Here I would have still my negative 1 squared. Let's go ahead and take care of that. So negative 1 times negative 1 would give me a positive 1. Negative 3 times a positive 3 would give me minus 9. And so I would end up with negative 8 inside the numerator on top of the fraction. Right, so negative 8, after all of that, is going to go on top. Let's take care of the bottom. On the bottom, we have a square. So we have 96 minus 2 times 36. Let's take care of multiplication. 2 times 36 is 72. And then finally, subtraction gives me 24. Okay, so now at this point, if you type that into my math lab, it's going to say, although you have the correct answer, it is not in the correct format. I hate that box when it pops up. But that's because it's not simplified. This fraction is not simplified because actually 8 goes into both the top and bottom. So if I divide the numerator by 8 and the denominator by 8, which I'm allowed to do as long as I divide both top and bottom by the same number, I'm going to end up with negative 1 over 3. And so that's my answer. Now with fractions in algebra, we can put the negative in with the numerator, or we can put it out front, but we don't like it on the bottom. I'm not quite sure why, but we never put a negative in the denominator. So the negative can be out front, the negative can be with the numerator, but that's it.